Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready, Johnny?
You're not that
I know. All
Right,
right.
me?
Yeah.
I'm ready? Oh, I guess so. Yeah, go ahead. That's right.
Johnny's ready.
Yeah.
Welcome everybody to the Port Hueneme Historical Society Museum. Back by popular demand is Linda Benz. She was here about 8 months ago, maybe a year. But I remember, and she spoke to us about Chinese fishermen in Ventura County and the abalone trade. And it was very interesting. And today we get to learn about Chinese in Ventura County per se and their contributions to our county. Let's see here, and also Ms. Benz has extensively investigated the presence of Chinese abalone harvesters. We talked about that in Channel Islands, and she's worked with the National Park Service and the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. She's the mother of 4 sons. I didn't know that. Well, congratulations. And she drove down from San Pedro today, so she made it
Up.
Up? Okay, I always say down, you know. Anyway, so,
We'll be driving down.
yes. In 2012, she co-authored with William Gao, Hidden Lives, A Century of Chinese American History in Ventura County. So that's the backdrop for our discussion today. Please welcome Linda.
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you for inviting me back again. I really enjoy coming here. Coming from a big city in San Pedro, and you come here and you get off the freeway and you have to drive and drive and drive to get here. You know that when you get there, you're getting someplace really great. So what we're going to talk about today is the Chinese in Ventura County, and we're mainly going to focus on Ventura and Oxnard, but I have some information about Hueneme as well. So here we go. So I am the historian for the Ventura County Chinese American Historical Society, and I give you an idea of some of the things that we've done since we started. We started in the year 2000. So we have written a book, as we talked about, which is right here. We published this book with Will Gao. Now, Will Gao's great-grandfather was a merchant here in Hueneme, so you're going to hear all about that really soon. So that was in 2012. We also produced a documentary called Courage and Contributions, and this is actually on YouTube. So if you want to see this on YouTube, it's 52 minutes of the most wonderful history you've ever seen. We also published a journal for the Ventura County Museum here. That was in 2012. We have this mural. Has anybody seen this mural? This is in Ventura, right by the mission. We worked with a Chinese artist to have that painted. And then we also were part of an exhibit about the Chinese in Ventura County at the museum in 2012. So let's get into the history of Chinese Americans here in Ventura County. So the Chinese came here obviously from China, from southeast, down here from the Guangdong province. And what was happening during the time period when the Chinese originally came here with the gold rush, 1849, 1850, is that there was a lot of unrest. There were opium wars, there were local rebellions, there was environmental floods and all kinds of things that was affecting the farming. So the Chinese men left the Guangdong province here and came to California. They actually went all over the world, but we'll just focus on California. So it was mostly men that came. Many of them were married, and they left their wives behind. So they came here to make money, to send the money back to their families. So this is a village that is in China. This is a Suhu village. So we know that a lot of the people that came to Ventura County were from the Suhu clan, and later on the Jew family members came to Ventura County. So this is Yet San. So you can see here, this is the houses. They were farmers from this village, growing rice. This is the school, K-8, and this is a gate. So what happened is in the immigrant villages, they would send money back. So the villages that had a lot of money that came back, they would build things like gates and schools and community centers. And they also built these mansions. Now this is fascinating to me, is that there are several of these mansions that are on the other side of.
So the dollar was very strong. I mean, it must have been incredibly Do you have an estimate of how
I
valuable
don't.
it was?
I don't. All I know is that a lot of money went into these villages. And so the whole goal was to go from China to America, wherever it was that you were going to work, and then send money back. So you're sending money back to your family, and then money, once your family's taken care of, then you start to build on the infrastructure of your village. Yes, sir?
When you say sending money back, how did they do that? I mean, I don't think they had Western Union and all this stuff. What was the primary way of getting this cash
So,
back?
There were these companies that were called Gold Mountain Traders, and what they would do is that they would give the money from, so let's say in Ventura, okay, so you would give your money to one of the merchants in Ventura, okay, and they had a whole like network, because you know there's a very large import and export network going on between California and China at that time. So they would get the money via their network, and it would go into Hong Kong, okay? And then from Hong Kong, it would call into the mainland and say, there were ways to call into the mainland, and then send runners in to get the money, the remittances from there. So let's go back to these mansions. So these are abandoned mansions, and they're on the other side. So there's this river that runs through the middle of Yet Sand. So they're on the other side, so they're not in the actual village. And they're abandoned. And I would like to think, now this is my dream, is to go to this village and to find out who built these. Because, let me show you. Some of the people from Ventura and Hueneme came from that village. So we have Suhu Hal right here, who was a servant for Senator Bard, and then you have the Suhu Sui family. So Suhu Hal, he worked with Senator Bard for 17 years, and then he went and established a laundry in Ventura, and he ultimately went back to his village. So I would like to think that one of those mansions was his, but can't prove it. And then we have the Suhu Sui family, who went back to China in 1918. So they lived in Ventura and then went back to China in 1918. So that is the Suhu village there. So when the Chinese originally came to California, they of course worked in the mines, and they also would work on the Transcontinental Railroad. And of course we just celebrated the 150-year anniversary in May for the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. Of course they were farm laborers. So what I think is really interesting is that as the economy in California changed from ranching to farming, the Chinese were here, and they were also farmers in China. So they had knowledge. So I think it's really fascinating that when the economy in California changes, who's on the ground? People with knowledge of agriculture. And of course, we can't have any jobs complete without talking about Chinese abalone fishermen. And fishermen, that was also one of the occupations that the Chinese were involved with. So they made a big contribution to the building of California and to America. So they come in early on, and things are going pretty well. They're originally welcomed into the country, but then we have an economic downturn, which happens around the 1870s as the mining returns diminish, and as the Transcontinental Railroad, as goods are flowing into California, we have this major economic downturn. So what happens is that the Chinese are targeted as being kind of the reason why this is happening, because they were engaged in the kind of low rate labor market. So there was all of this. If you read the newspapers from this time, it's always like the Chinese must go, yellow peril, we have to get rid of them, they have the jobs, what is happening? So they were excluded. They were the first group to be excluded from coming to America.
Why were they treated so harshly?
Well, it's xenophobia. You know, they were different. They wore different clothing, they spoke a different language, they worshipped a different god, they were discriminated against, like other ethnic groups that have been discriminated
But this
against.
is pretty black. I mean, that's...
Yes. It's pretty shocking, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes, yes. Well, let me tell you about it. So they're federally excluded in 1882 for 10 years. So they say you're out for 10 years, okay? But they didn't want to mess up the merchant relationship with China. So there were certain people that were still allowed to come. So the laborers were excluded, but merchants, travelers, diplomats, they could come to America, okay? And their children could come from China as well, and people that were born here in America, of course, could stay. It wasn't the kind of thing where they were rounding people up and sending them away, okay? It's just that they excluded them from coming. Then they could not become citizens. They could not testify in court against Euro-Americans. They couldn't hold certain jobs. So for example, when I showed you the jobs that they had, I didn't show you like teachers or lawyers or scientists. They were limited to the jobs that they were allowed to have. They couldn't own land. This is the Alien Land Law. That's a California law. And they couldn't marry Euro-Americans. So this law lasts until 1943, 61 years of exclusion. It is. It's unbelievable. And it's so, people just don't know. They don't know that this happened. So, okay. So in that, because of those laws, it pretty much has dictated the way that the people, the Chinese, were able to move in and out of America. So what they wanted to do, because their families were in China, right? So they wanted to go to China to visit. They wanted to go visit their wives in China. So the government wants them to go but not come back, okay? So whenever they got to the port, they had to go through this very extensive investigation to prove that they were one of the people that were allowed to come back, so merchants or natives or children of merchants. So all of these records, so it was a huge situation where there was all this testimony. So they would interview the person who wants to go to China. They would interview their business partners, and they would pick like 3 people from the community, like here in Hueneme, and they would interview Euro-Americans. And if they could prove that they were allowed to go to China and come back, they gave them what we call a return certificate. So all of these are kept, and I read them. So this is how I've gotten a lot of this information here. They're held by the National Archives. So I spent a lot of time in Paris, California, reading these, and in San Bruno. So, okay, so let's talk about Ventura. So Chinatown in Ventura started around 1865. We have a letter from Cephas Bard to his family back east. Then he called them Tartars. I don't know why he called them Tartars, but there's lots of Celestials, Tartars, lots of different names, at the mission. So that is our first evidence that the Chinese are in Ventura. And they're right here on Figueroa Street, and it's bounded by Main Street in Santa Clara. The mission is here, and right here is an alley that went through that area. So I'm going to show you some pictures. Luckily, we have the museum has some beautiful pictures. So these are around. I've had people look at these. So, yes, sir.
You said Chinatown was formed in 1892?
No, 1865.
18 what?
1865.
1865.
They could have been there earlier because I have Chinese abalone fishermen on the Channel Islands in 1856. But the first notification that we have of them, evidence that we have, is 1865 in Ventura.
And why isn't there a Chinatown there now?
Oh, I'm going to get to it.
Or when did it dissolve?
I'm going to get to it. Well, I can tell you, you're
getting there.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yes.
Don't let me jump ahead.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, so these are around 1890. I've had people look at these pictures to get an idea of when they were taken. So this is it. It's just 1 block long. So there's the mission, and then we have buildings on both sides. These are pretty much stores, and the alley runs back this way. This is the entrance to the alley right here. So what's really great about this is that you can see people standing around. Now, this is kind of hard to see, but right here on this cart, there's a little round sign, okay? This has fascinated me for years. So I always want to know what they were using this cart for. Were they using it for laundry? Were they using it to deliver vegetables? What were they doing? So after years, I finally got as close to an original of this picture as possible, because if you take copies of pictures and expand them, you can't read anything, you can't tell. So I got the closest to the original as possible. So a little round sign that's right there on that cart says clams, 5 cents. So we know, then I found a newspaper account saying that they were harvesting clams. So we know that they were doing that as well. So this is the Bing Hong Tong. Bing Hong Tong. So I'm sure you've heard of tongs. People talk about tongs and tong wars. So it was actually a fraternal organization. So what would happen is that the Chinese, because they were being discriminated against, they knew that they needed protection. So their first line of protection is they would set up either village or clan associations. So your Yi family, you would stick together, okay? Or if you were from a certain village, you would stick together. And if you didn't have an association, then you would join the Tongs. So they were They were really kind of a social organization, and they acted as a people's court. They took care of funerals, and they would help you to finance businesses as well. And this building had beds for travelers where they could stay for a few days. And so they basically just kind of took care of people. So some people say that the Tongs were criminal. They were involved in what was considered criminal back at that time, like gambling. Oh my gosh, gambling. So, but they were also a fraternal organization. And this, has anybody seen this picture before? This picture's circulated pretty widely. So a few years ago, I was in Santa Barbara. I was looking at Chinese abalone fishermen, and I got a hold of somebody's personal album. And I'm looking through, and I find this picture. And I say, wait a second, that's Ventura. So I have this copy, and as you can know, it's on the cover of our book. You can see it on the cover of our book. And I don't know who this is. I've been trying to figure this out for such a long time. I've taken this to people who had relatives in Ventura, and I'd say, oh, is this your grandfather? Get this, do you know who this is? So don't know yet, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep on trying.
I like his shoes.
Oh, you like his shoes?
Yeah, they look
Yeah.
nice, his shoes look.
Aren't those, probably they were silk and embroidered. And look at that outfit. Is that the cutest outfit? Oh, great picture. Okay, so this is the west side of Figueroa Street. Just to give you an idea, here's the Bing Kong Tong. Here's stores that are here. So once again, this picture fascinated me. And I couldn't see what was happening under here. So this is Sam Fong Yi and Company. He's a merchant there. So I just needed to know what was happening underneath that awning. So once again, I went and got close to the original as possible. So right here, I want to see them and had it enlarged. And there they are. So this is probably Sam Fong Yi right here, and this is Tom Lin Yan, who you're going to meet in a minute. So this is how we learn things, right? We take pictures and we enhance them.
So what was that little trick you just did with your PowerPoint? I would need to learn that.
Oh, you want to learn that? Okay.
Yeah.
So put in an arrow, okay, animated it,
Uh-huh.
and then spun that one in. Did you like that?
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the companies that were in Ventura. So this is Sing Hing and Company. So this picture comes from the National Archives. So this is the interior of his store, and that is the back of the store where we had a gambling table. So of course at this time gambling was illegal. So it's interesting to me that this is obviously an investigator who is there, and this is in the National Archives. So it might have been a situation where they were investigating Sing Hing and Company. So let me tell you a little bit about him. His name is right here. His name is Ung Hing. He's the owner of this company with partners. These are partnerships. The Chinese businesses are all partnerships. And one of the reasons why they're partnerships is if you would invest in a company and then you'd become a merchant. And only merchants can stay, and only merchants can bring families in. So they're partnerships. And the interesting thing is that the threshold to be a partner is $1,000. So when you look at the partnership files, most of the people invested $1,000. So they could stay in the country and bring their families in. So Ung Hing was born in 1852, and he came to the United States in 1860. He was head of the Sing Hing and Company. He also had, he had headquarters in Hong Kong with branches in Mexico. He owned land in Ventura, Oxnard, and here in Hueneme. He had stocks in the Canton Bank. He invested in steamships in China, and he was also involved in the K Fung Company in Santa Barbara. So he mostly got his income from buying land. I have lots of deeds from him. He's one of my favorite people because he's very well documented in that. He's in the National Archives. We have deeds, we have pictures. So he's very, very well documented. And he also owned the land under the Bing Kong Tong. So I'm going to imagine he was the head of the Bing Kong Tong, because the heads of Bing Kong Tongs were usually merchants. Yes, sir.
Who came over that wasn't a merchant? I mean, if they're trying to purchase membership, partnership with $1,000, what type of person would they be?
Okay, so the government is trying to get rid of laborers, okay? So what I'm going to assume, what I've been told is that when you come here to America, the first thing you want to do so that you can stay and be protected is to invest in a company. okay? So what I see in the immigration files is they say that they're partners, but they also could have a laundry, or they also could, you know, be a farmer.
I
So,
thought you said farmers couldn't come.
yeah, farmers are considered laborers. So this is the loophole in the law, okay? So laborers are excluded. So if you, okay, so let's say you want to go to China and return, okay? You have to go through this entire interview process, okay? And if they find out that you're a laborer, okay, you can go to China, but you can't come back. They won't give you a return certificate.
Oh.
Does that
got
make
it,
sense?
Got it.
Okay, so even if you are a laborer and you know the laws, because they knew the laws, they knew how to get around the laws, then you would come here, invest in a business, and then you can still be a laborer, but you can prove that you've invested in a business.
Right.
Okay, does that make sense?
So where did they get the $1,000?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I don't know. It could have been money that they pooled together. I know that like in the Bing Kong Tong, they had this whole process of pooling money together so you could buy businesses. It could have been money, family money that came from China. I don't know.
Pyramid, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, like,
So if you're laboring here to send money back,
yes,
and yet you have to accumulate $1,000 for membership,
yes.
you probably won't get your wife or children over here, right?
Right, well, it takes a lot to get your wife and children over here. So you've invested the money, now you're gonna get shares on that money, okay? And then you're also, so you're a partner in the business, okay? You're gonna get shares, okay? And then you're also laboring someplace else, all right? And then you try to go to China, which is gonna cost money, and then bring your family here is also gonna cost money. And I'm not 100% sure that they really wanted early on to bring their families here, because this was the Wild West, you know? They were pretty much coming here just to work. So it takes a different kind of person who wants to bring the family here. And you'll see that this happens later in the whole immigration cycle, that families come later on.
Okay, yeah.
Because we're pretty early here. We're here in 1902.
Yeah, because I understand that during the time that they were building the railroad, they didn't want women.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was considered dangerous. And the women were over in China taking care of their families over there, the mother-in-law, and because they were natural locals, so they lived with the mother-in-law. So, yeah, okay. All right, so this is the back of the Sing Hing and Company, and this is where An Hing and his wife, Su Chang Ti, who we're going to meet in a couple of minutes, they lived in the back here. This is also from the National Archives. They took a lot of pictures when they came. Thank goodness they did. So in 1900, census records show that An Hing and his wife had 9 people living with them here in the back of Sing Hing and Company. Among them were 2 partners, 4 boarders, and a servant who cooked for the family. So I found that surprising. You don't think about that. So that was An Hing. We're going to see him again later on. Okay, they had, here it is, they had, the Chinese set up their own fire company. And this is them. And I'm not 100% sure when this picture was taken. I keep asking people, and people will look at the buildings in the background.
how much it looks like.
Yeah.
But I know.
Exactly like.
I know. We were talking about how this hose cart looks like this hose cart. Okay. All right, so we know that they were in town in 1876 because they're on the advertisement for the 4th of July parade in 1876. So here they are. This is their hose cart, okay? This is the hose cart for the city of Ventura, okay? So big difference right there. And right here they have a gong. So whenever there was a fire, they would ring this gong, and then they would run to where the hose cart was stored, which was in the back. Okay, remember I told you there was an alley that came off of Figueroa. So the shed that held this was at the end of the alley, and then they would pull it out and put out fires. So the main reason that they had their own fire company is that they feared that if Chinatown burned, that nobody would come to put out the fire.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, they were absolutely right.
Did you say 1873?
Well, we know that 1876 they're in town, so I'm not 100% sure when this picture was taken, okay? So this hose cart was moved, there was a second Chinatown, which we're going to talk about in a minute. This was moved to the second Chinatown, and we know that there was a hose cart in Oxnard as well. So
They
what's
only had
real,
one fire cart?
I'm sorry?
They only had one water cart or?
The Chinese did.
Only one?
Yeah, yeah.
Fire cart. No, we think it's the same one, same time.
So the other interesting thing about this is that they were so good at putting out fires, is that they went into the city of Ventura and put out fires. And people were very grateful. So in 1903, there's a newspaper account that suggests that the city hold a benefit for the Chinese fire brigade so that they can get a new hose cart. That's pretty amazing. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the families. This is the Yi family. And the Yi family came to Ventura in 1876, and they brought their daughter Emily. This is Emily right here. They brought their daughter Emily. She was the first child in Ventura's Chinatown. Yi Hei, right here, the father. He was a cook for the farm, so he was in the little wagon that would follow the farmers around, and he would cook for them. And he was also the man who held the key for the shed where the hose cart was located. So his family called him Fire Captain. So they had several children. They had George, let's see, this is George, this is Nellie, and they had William. And so George was born in 1884, Nellie was born in 1888, William was born in 1894 in Ventura's Chinatown. And sadly, their mother died in 1897, and they moved to Los Angeles. And we have, okay, so Nellie, right here, Nellie's daughter, Marie Louie, is the person who we used to have our meetings at her house for the Ventura County Chinese Historical Society of Southern California in Camarillo. So we would go and she would tell us all about her family. These are her family pictures. And she made fantastic cookies. It was the best monthly meeting ever. And unfortunately, she died a couple of years ago. But she gave us a lot of information about
Marie
the
Louie was the first born?
Nellie, okay, Nellie was born in Ventura. Emily is the first child. Emily is the first child. So when they moved to Los Angeles, Emily got married, and that's why they moved to Los
Is there
Angeles.
any reason why one girl is brought out in blue?
Isn't that great?
It was colorized.
Yeah, I think there wasn't colored. I think people colored in their pictures.
painted them.
Yeah, you're going to see it again. But yeah, isn't that amazing?
I mean, she's the only one that's colored.
Yeah, maybe they didn't have the time to color in everybody else.
Okay.
I don't know. But I think that's interesting. If you don't have color photography, just do it yourself, right? Okay, so what happened is right around 1906, they decided to improve Figueroa Boulevard. So the Chinese community was moved, okay? The only part of the Chinese community that remained was the land that King owned. So a little bit, I think the Ding Tong Tong stayed. So a little bit of the Chinese community stayed on Figueroa Street, and then they moved to the corner of Main Street and the Boulevard, Ventura Boulevard in Ventura.
When was that?
That was 1906.
06.
1906, yes. So here it is.
Sanborn.
Yeah, oh, you recognize that. This is the archaeologist's friend right here, Sanborn maps. So Sanborn maps are Sanborn fire insurance maps. They sent people around, all around the place, to record cities because the buildings were made of wood mostly. So they needed to find out, what was made of wood and what was made of brick. And these are big. They're big and they're in color. And they're done periodically. I think for Ventura we have like 1887, 1906, and like 1923. So they're not done every year. So anyway, so here we are. That's what it looked like right there. And there's a hose cart. I think the hose cart is right in here somewhere. And it actually says how many feet of hose it has. Of course, they want to know that stuff, right?
So are you saying they moved because of the wooden structures to stone structures?
Okay, so they moved from Figueroa Street because they were improving that. They wanted to tear down Chinatown in 1906, but a few of the buildings stayed because they were owned by a Chinese merchant. And then they moved here to the corner of Main Street in Ventura
So
Avenue.
it wasn't to move up to a better place?
No.
It was because they were forced to move?
They were displaced.
Okay.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Are they also moving to other wooden structures? 'Cause
They're actually-
I'm thinking some people can't afford to move to a upgraded structure.
Right. They're not really upgraded. So you saw the buildings for King and Company. That's what the buildings look like. They were kind of dilapidated wooden buildings. And I know that they actually, in some cases, physically moved buildings. Like I know they moved buildings here from Hueneme to Oxnard. So You know, I don't have any pictures of the buildings for the second Chinatown, but I'm going to assume that they were wooden buildings. Yeah, because I know that Pirano's is the main, like, brick building in Ventura. That's still there. So, yeah, I'm going to assume wooden. Yeah. Anyway, so that's what it looked like. And here are the people that bought the land. So you have Suhu Bach right here. He was a merchant. And Tom Lim Yan. So Suhu Bach, he was a merchant, and he owned the Wing Tai Yun Company. And Tom Lim Yan, he's a fascinating character. They called him the mayor of Ventura, Chinatown. He owned the Kung Wo and Company, and he was one of the earliest merchants in Ventura. And he spoke English. He was a translator, and he had his own school at one point. Very educated man, fascinating man. So he, in 1909, wanted to go back to China. So the goal is to die in China, is to come here, make your fortune, go back to China, and die in China. So that was his goal in 1909. So he got on the ship to go back, and he died on the ship.
Oh.
So he didn't actually make it. So this is the Suhu Bach family, and this is another family. We have connection with this family, and they shared their pictures. So this is Minnie. This is Minnie. That's her American name. So she was born in Ventura. She's actually a Yi. She was a Yi gal from, not Ventura, I'm sorry, from Santa Barbara. So she and her sister Annie were born in Santa Barbara. So she married Suhu Bach in 1895, and she had 6 children, and one of her children died in a cart accident. But these are all of the children that they had. And she died in 1913 when she was 35 years old, leaving her children behind. And then her husband, Suhu Bach, who was also pretty important because he had the Tong put on a big funeral for him, so he was a pretty important merchant. He died in 1907. So the children were left orphans. Yeah. Okay. We're moving to Oxnard. So before I move to Oxnard, are there any other questions about Ventura? So, one thing I forgot to say is that, so Ventura, for the second Chinatown, it was there from 1906 to 1923, and it was improved. That area was improved.
You
Yes.
mentioned the Jew family, I believe?
Yes, the
And
Jew family.
they own the Jew market, I
Yes,
believe, right?
yes. So they come later. They come in the 20s.
I
So,
went to school with Tim.
oh, okay, yeah. Dorothy Chu,
Yeah.
she was fantastic. She's helped us so much with history. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is that Suhu related to the mayor? You see the mayor?
Oh, yes, thank you for asking. You're going to see more of him in just a minute. Yes, Bill Suhu. Yes, okay, so let's talk about Oxnard, okay?
Yeah, on top of it,
So we know that, so we're here on the Oxnard Plain right around 1897. So Albert Mulhart and Ed Borchard, is that how I say it? Borchard. They were prominent local farmers, and they approached the Oxnard brothers to build the sugar beet factory in Oxnard. They purchased land on the east side of Saviors Road for the plant and started construction in 1898 and completed it in 1899. Look at that. How did they do that? How did they do that in 1 year? How long would that take us now to do that? It's crazy. So the farmers were contracted to provide beets to the factory. So the farmers that were harvesting the beets were Chinese, Japanese, and Mexicans, and they labored in the fields. So the Chinese did not work in the factory. So they set up their Chinatown right around 1899 on Saviors Road, which is now Oxnard Boulevard, between 7th and 8th Street. And they had an alley that was going right here. That was their alley as well. And here's A Street. And if you look at this real closely, you can see that you have Chinese here. You can see where it says Chinatown right here. And then you also have Japanese people living here. And then this is the female boarding house right there. Female boarding house. We're going to leave it at that, okay?
Oh.
So, yes, because Chinatown is considered a red light district. So it's interesting that you have female boarding house in a red light district. Okay. Let's see, make sure I told you everything. Okay, so the buildings, we know that they were mostly wooden buildings here, according to city directories. They had Chinese stores, barbershops, employment agencies, laundries, restaurant, herb shop, a saloon in 1916, Bing Kong Tong, which you're going to see in a moment, and residents also lived here. Okay, so this is what the community looked like. There's not a lot of pictures of Oxnard's Chinese community. I think it's interesting we have more pictures of Ventura than we do of Oxnard. So this is, I think this might be A Street right here, and then this is the alley. And we're looking at, I've looked at this picture so many times, and I'm going to guess this is like the 40s, okay? Now this picture right here is from 1926, and I'll tell you why I know, is because there was a Tong War. And it was a Tong War in Santa Barbara in 1926, and one of the people involved with it ended up here in Oxnard, and he was killed. So this is from the museum. I think it's like in their coroner books or crime books. So the original picture has the victim right here. So his body is laying there, and he's the victim. So I photoshopped him out, so you can see. Yes.
What is a Tom?
Okay, so we just talked about the Tongs. So the Tongs is the fraternal organizations which help people out that don't have like a village association or a surname association. So travelers can go and they can go there. People would come like in from the fields on the weekends, and they would go and they'd play mahjong and they speak their language. And some of the Tongs were involved in what you call illegal activities like gambling or prostitution.
Was it social?
It was a fraternal social organization. Yes, yes.
I'm trying to visualize where that sugar beet factory was located. You said it's on Saviors Road between 7th and 8th Street.
No, that's where Chinatown was.
Oh.
Can we see it? Let's see, can we see it on? No.
I thought it was that big open square.
Do you know where Five Points is in Oxnard?
Yeah.
Okay, if you go down Woolly Road, continue on through the intersection going east on Woolly Road, it's down about maybe 3 or 4 blocks on the left-hand side.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So anyway, so that gives you an idea of what it looked like. So I'm still trying to find pictures of Oxnard's Chinese community. Okay, and this is a new picture that we found. So here you see, so this is on Saviors Road here, and this,
By the way,
yes,
Saviors Road, between 7th and 8th Street, that's Oxnard Boulevard.
right, it changed. It used to be Saviors, yes,
okay,
It
okay.
gets confusing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It used to confuse the heck out of me too, yeah. Okay, so here we go, we have people that are, I don't know what they're digging a hole, they're pulling out a tree, I'm not quite sure what they're doing there. But we, yeah, you think so? Okay. Yeah, so we investigated this company right here, the Sushing Lung Company, and we know that it was in Oxnard as early as 1908. So we know that this picture is at least 1908. And what's interesting here is you can see children. Okay, so we're starting to see children here. Okay. All right, so this gives you an idea of what's happening with the population in Oxnard. So there was a Chinese community here in, excuse me, in Hueneme. It was on 4th and Broad. And when the sugar beet factory was placed in Oxnard, people flowed into Oxnard because there were jobs. So people from Hueneme came in, people from Ventura moved in. I've seen people from Santa Barbara that came into Oxnard. So you can get an idea of what the population was. So for the 1900 census, this is not recorded as Oxnard because Oxnard was just newly established. So it was recorded as Hueneme, but look at how many people, look at all the men that are coming in to work in the sugar beet factory. And then here are the women and children with this total. Then in 1910, we have the population starting to decline a little bit with 119 there and 6 here, and with a total of 125. And then we're declining. But look how the children are increasing. Isn't that interesting? Because you have a lot of merchants. And let me show you.
In those days, they're coming in from Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of transportation? You're talking about
Same.
working there, right?
Yeah, they would come in and live there. So what was
To live?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you said to work. Okay.
Oh, yeah, to live. they're pretty mobile, so like your laborers, they're pretty mobile. They're gonna
Yeah,
go
yeah.
where, you know, and that's why, and thank you for asking that question, is that's why the census is sometimes skewed, because you have to be in town when the census worker comes, okay? And we know that women are underrepresented because in a lot of cases they wouldn't open the door to the census takers. They, excuse me, they stayed inside a lot because they were stared at. You know, they were different and they were stared at. So anyway, so we can see this is in 1910. This is all the different occupations. So isn't this interesting that cooks is the highest category? So these would be cooks in like restaurants and homes. It was very, very prestigious to have a Chinese cook. We know that the Senator Bard's family, they mostly employed the Suhu family to be servants and cooks. You have, see all the merchants. So these merchants can bring their families in. So see how we have so many merchants in 1910. Laundrymen, farmers. These could be either probably like sharecroppers, gardeners. These are probably like the truck gardeners, the vegetable man that would go door to door. We know that we have that here in Ventura County. Servants, employment contractors, barbers. We had to have barbers because Chinese had a very specific hairstyle, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. Dishwasher and driver. So those are your occupations in the Chinese community in Oxnard in 1910.
Are they driving a motor vehicle or horse and buggy in 1910?
I'm going to guess horse and buggy. I
There
don't
were cars, but not very many.
Yeah, I can't imagine that a Chinese resident would have a car at that point. I don't know for sure. Yes.
So in the sugar beet factory, you said that the Chinese didn't work in the factories, they worked in the fields. Was that considered like a skilled job to work in the factory or something?
I don't know if they allowed them to work in the factory, because I know that when there was a big controversy about the Chinese even being involved with the factory when it first was built. I have all these newspaper accounts. It's like, no Chinese, we will not. They were discriminated against. We don't want them working with us. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe they weren't allowed to work in the factory. And also, sugar beet harvesting apparently is really difficult, stoop labor. So they did. Okay. All right, so speaking of farmers, here we go. So this is a picture of the cookhouse that's out on the plains here. And then these are Chinese farmers in the fields. Now, I love this picture. I teach Chinese American history to fourth graders, and I go off on this picture. Let me just tell you why. So what you see is that you see the laborers, and they're dressed in traditional clothing. So they're dressed in Chinese clothing. They have Chinese hats. Now this man right here, he has a queue, okay? So a queue is basically you have a braid, okay? So you grow this braid, and you grow it pretty much your whole life as it shows respect to the government in China. So what men would do, is that you would shave the front of your head, and then you'd have this queue that would go really long because you're growing it your whole life. And this man right here, he has it wrapped around his head. So they'd wrap it around their head and put their head on it when they're out in the fields. These men are eating communally, and they're eating out of rice dishes that were rice bowls that were imported from China. So this picture right here has a ton of information, and that came from the Oxnard Public Library. Okay, Golden Chicken Inn. I think we were talking about the Golden Chicken Inn earlier. Such a great place. Okay, so the Golden Chicken Inn was started by Hall Suhu. So Hall Suhu is this man right here. That's Hall Suhu. He came to the United States in 1916. He opened the Golden Chicken Inn in 1928 with 6 partners. He ran it until 1965 when he retired. That Suhu family retired and moved to Orange County in California. And there's been many, many Chinese New Year banquets here at this restaurant. So it's changed hands a couple of times since I've been doing this work. I've been doing this work for 25 years, and I think it's had 3 owners since I've done this. Has anybody eaten here at this? Yeah? Really good. And the interior is so great, too. Okay, so we're going back to the Bing Kong Tong. So there was pretty much a tong in every Chinese community. And so we know we have the Bing Kong Tong in Ventura. We also have the Bing Kong Tong in Oxnard. We have the Bing Kong Tong in Santa Barbara with a couple of other tongs. So there can be several different tong associations. So we know that the Bing Kong Tong in Oxnard was built in 1904. And Hall Suhu, right here, was the head of the Bing Kong Tong from 1923, probably until his death in the 1990s. And so this picture's from the newspaper in the 1940s. So it shows the interior of the Bing Kong Tong. And then this right here is also the interior of the Bing Kong Tong, because in 1959, they started a school, a Chinese language school. So this is what the kids are in the school. So you can see here, do you see right here where it says Freemasons? So what's interesting is that as the local community looks at what's happening in the tongs, they say, oh, it's a fraternal organization, it must be like the Freemasons. So the Chinese adopted that. They're not part of the Freemasons, but if it made them look good, they adopted it. So I think it's really great that we've got this picture that shows that. So we're going back to Anhing because he moved to Oxnard. So he took his business and moved to Oxnard. And once again, somebody colored in this picture. They used multiple markers on that one to color that one in. So Anhing had an arranged marriage with Suhu Chang-ti. So in 1895, the wedding hit the front page of the local newspaper, and it's unbelievable. So she's in San Francisco. He was in Ventura at the time. He finds her. It's a matched. Okay, the Chinese marriages were matched. She was 19. He was 42. So she comes into town. It talks about how she comes on the train, and it talks about what she's wearing. It gives every detail of her trousseau. And they got married, and they stayed married until he died. He moved his store to Oxnard in 1905. They have 2 adopted children. This is Willie, and they have Mabel, who you're going to meet in a minute. And what's really fascinating about this picture is that he is wearing official clothing. So this clothing is what an official in China would wear. So he is not an official at all, okay? So I see this with merchants. I've seen this. There's been some recent scholarship done on this. So we're thinking that maybe this is how he got respect, is by wearing this official clothing. So, and this hat right here is a hat just like that in the museum in Ventura. So I'm going to guess it's his, because I'm not sure who else would have an official hat like that. So that is him. So he dies in 1927, and Suhu Chang-ti, his wife, continued to live in Oxford. I think she ultimately moved to San Francisco. So I've been collecting pictures of her. So I'm trying to get these by date. So this is probably one of the earliest pictures here when she comes. And then you can see that she changes over time. She was a seamstress, and she changes over time. Can you see what happens to her over time? I ask my 4th graders this all the time. Like, what's the difference between her here and here?
She grow ahead.
She what?
Grow ahead.
Oh, what was that? It changes. There we go. So she originally was sticking with traditional clothing, and she becomes more westernized over time. Good job.
I was close enough too.
You were very close. Very close.
No, she grew ahead.
Since this was an arranged marriage, and I would assume that they had status in China. How is it that she didn't have bound feet?
Oh, okay. Okay.
And was that local, certain
Okay.
districts or something?
Okay, so she's American-born. She was born in San Francisco.
Oh.
So what's interesting is, remember I told you about the alien land laws in 1913 where you can't own land if you can't be a citizen? Anhing, because he was really smart and he owned all this land, he transferred all of it into her name. So on the maps where you see land ownership, it's her name. So he was really smart. As far as bound feet goes, that was practiced in China. And I know that in San Francisco, when they had the San Francisco earthquake, a lot of those women had bound feet and had a hard time getting out of the buildings. Because, well, let me tell you what it is. It's a traditional practice that they don't do this anymore. excuse me, in that little feet were very desirable, okay? They're called lotus blossoms. So when a little girl was around 7, it changed, the actual age of it was different because China's big and they have different practices. So what they would do, one of the ways that they would do it is that they would break their feet, this little girl's feet, and then they would take them. So here's how it works. Here's your foot, okay? They break your feet, they pull your toes under like this, they keep your big toe intact, and then they bind your feet, and they stay that way.
So it stays small.
This big.
Even women here got themselves into shoes that were way too small.
Yes.
We have one over here. I'll show you.
Yeah, it's like a sign of
It's a
beauty.
boot, yeah. So it wasn't just in China.
Yeah. Yeah, us girls, we do things to be beautiful, The whole corset thing, oh, don't get me started on that.
So
So,
the original foot finish.
yeah, it goes way back.
Male.
Yeah, it goes way back. So there were different ways of binding feet. I know that Lisa C. writes. Anybody read any of Lisa C.'s books? She's a very famous Chinese American author. I know that there's one way where they would have the girls walk on their feet until their toes broke, and then they would bind them. So, and the smaller the better.
Could they walk when they were
No.
in that condition?
No, they couldn't. So they were very elite. They couldn't work in the fields. I mean, if you go online, I tell this to my 4th graders too, you can go online and see what their feet look like. I mean, they're deformed. Their feet are deformed. So it was difficult. Okay, this is Wang Ah Gao's family. Now, Wang Ah Gao is the great-grandfather of my co-author of my book, William Gao. So let me tell you all about him. He arrived in California in 1868 when he was 15 years old. So a lot of these people arrive young, and they arrive alone, without families. So they would have families that would meet them here. So they'd have families that would meet them in San Francisco and then bring them, to the community where the rest of their family was, like the Suhus came here. He came to Ventura in 1866 when he was in his 30s. He lived here in Hueneme, and he had a vegetable garden. He also had 2 stores. He's quite the entrepreneur. He had 2 stores with partners by 1890, and he was a labor contractor. And in 1901, after Oxnard was established, in the newspaper, they called him the King of Chinatown, because he contracted both Chinese, Japanese, and Mexican labor. So remember how we had the labor contractor? That's a lot of the merchants were labor contractors, where they had like family members that were laborers that they would send out to different jobs. In 1903, he bought 2 lots in Oxnard and physically moved his buildings. Here we have him physically moving his buildings from Hueneme to Oxnard. His first wife died in 1903, and then in 1906, he married Luau, which is this gal right here, okay, who had lived in San Francisco. So there's not a lot of women, because the women are in China. So a lot of times you have to go to San Francisco, where we have a bigger, more established Chinatown there. She was illiterate. She didn't speak English. She was 19. He was 50. Kind of see a theme going on there. Young women marrying older men. Together they had 6 children. Their oldest was Tommy, born in 1908, and their youngest was Marjorie. Luau was able to bridge the gap. This is the only person that I've studied that was able to bridge the gap between the Chinese community and white society. So in 1914, she was a member of the Women's Improvement Club, and she was the only Chinese woman in that group. Wang Ah Gao dies in 1929, and this is his gravestone. And so on Chinese gravestones, there's a lot of information. It usually gives you their real name, okay? Because Chinese had multiple names. They had a birth name, they had a school name, they had a merchant name, sometimes they had a death name. So it usually gives you their real name and where they were born. So Chinese gravestone is really, really important. So he dies 1929, she dies 1932, leaving her children behind. So lots of children become orphaned because of either childbirth. It looks like many Suhu died of tuberculosis. So lots of children being left without their parents. So this is the Sim family. Also another family in Oxnard. And the parents were Sim Him and Tama Toy, which is kind of an inside-out name. So it's kind of like a Mr. and Mrs., so this is kind of an inside-out name. But she ultimately became a Sim. They had 5 children, Annie, Daisy, Sue, Henry, and Charlie. They lived on A Street in Oxnard, and Simham was a clerk in a drugstore. He died in 1919. Then according to the 1920 census, Tom Latoy was a widow with 5 children ranging in the ages of 15 years to 3 years, and she listed her profession as a vegetable gardener. And you can see that this is in Oxnard, and this is probably the land that she was working here. In 1929, Charlie, who is right here, Charlie was planning to go away on a trip, so he was showing his mother how to use the gun to protect herself while he was gone, and he accidentally shot himself and he died. But it took days for him to die. There's newspaper accounts of this. It was a horrible, horrible death. So Annie, who I think this is Annie right here, she ended up marrying one of Suhu Bach's sons and ended up living in Ventura. So lots of connection between the Chinese communities.
How did the orphans survive?
Well, I can tell you about the Suhu Bach family. So remember that one of the first slides that I showed you where I showed you the Suhu family that was from Yat San, Suhu Sui's family who lived in Ventura and moved to China in 1918. So it looks like from 1913 to 1918, that Suhu family took care of many Suhu's children. So they're tightly connected.
I'm thinking that there are a lot of orphans that probably didn't have family connections.
Yeah.
And was there an orphanage for them? Or?
I don't know of an orphanage. I always hear that it's other family members because it's a chain migration. So they called like Oxnard the Suhu town. So there were other Suhus that could take care of Suhu children that were orphaned. And in a lot of cases, it's pretty sad. The children have to go to work very young. I know that in the Suhu Bach family, the children are out there, in the orchards, as teenagers. So from what I understand is that families did take care of them and they did have to work from a young age.
Oh, okay, because I'm thinking they were living in the streets.
I don't know of that. I haven't heard of that. But I know that they're very poor and they're in really sad circumstances for them.
Yeah, because I would think most Chinese families were poor anyway, so that you wouldn't want to take in another mouth to feed.
Right. But, they're family. And they're from, in some cases they're from the same village. So, yeah. Okay, let's see. So this picture, I love this picture. This came from Daisy Sim's photo album. So we interviewed Daisy Sim for Courage and Contributions, and she came to the interview with her photo album. And she said, "Oh, would you like to have copies of these pictures?" And I'm like, "Yes, thank you so much." So she put it in a FedEx box, and I showed up for work one day, and it's sitting on my front porch. This most precious of albums is sitting on my front porch. So we copied several of the pictures. And so these are the children that we just talked about. So Mabel Ung, that's Suhu Chua and Ung Hing's daughter. The Sim sisters are here, right here, okay? And then Ann Gao is there. So remember how we showed that we had lots of children that are coming up in the 1920s? Here's some of them, right here. And they look adorable in this picture. Okay, now we're going to talk about Bill Suhu. So this is Suhu Yi Tom right here, and he is Bill Suhu's father. And he was born in 1853, and he came to Oxnard in about the 1920s. He came from the San Luis Obispo area to start a store. He had a store on the alley in Oxnard. It was called Wing Chung Lung and Company. And now you're going to get to see his family. So here is the family. So he married, we call her Mama Suhu because her restaurant was Mama Suhu. So he married her in about 1910, and she was a mail order bride. She came over from China, so they were met. So she's in this case, they're not going to San Francisco to find a bride. He's actually pulling a bride from China. And in the family legend, the family says that Papa, I call him Papa Suhu, he had sent money over to his village, and so to repay him, because they couldn't repay him in cash, they sent Mama Suhu over as mail order bride. So when they were married, she was 27, he was 64. Once again, younger women marrying older men. So when they came to Oxnard in 1920, they had 2 daughters. They had Dorothy and Rose. And then Irene was born in Oxnard. Bill was born in Oxnard in 1924. And then came Bartley. And Bartley is right here, Bartley. So Bill, Bartley, Eddie, they're in age range right there, little stair steps. So when Bartley was born, okay, Papa Suhu was 74. So he was having kids later in life. So what they did is that they set up the store on the alley, because he'd had a store in San Luis Obispo, but Mama Suhu would cook, and people would say, "You're a fantastic cook." So they set up a restaurant, and they called that the Oriental Inn, and that was on the alley. So Bill actually, he attended local schools. He was at Haydock Elementary, Roosevelt School, and Oxnard High School, where he lettered in basketball, track, and tennis. And he was undefeated in the county in tennis. He was quite the athlete. So this is the interior and exterior of Mama Suhu's. So Bill he served in World War II, and when he came back to Oxnard, they built Mama Suhu's Orient on what is now Oxnard Boulevard. And it's called Mama Suhu's Orient right here. And the family lived upstairs, and they all worked in the restaurant. And what is so fantastic about this picture, can you see these murals? They have these murals painted on the walls. And you can get real close up to these, and they're just beautiful. And apparently, as of a few years ago, they were still there. This building is still in Oxnard. Oh, is it? Is it a Mexican restaurant now? Oh, okay. It was closed. Yeah, I know, because I know that Angela Suhu, Bill's widow, she wanted to rent it out. What she really wanted, she wanted to make a museum to Bill, and she was never able to do it, which would have been fantastic. So anyway, so that is the restaurant. So the family worked there. This is Mama Suhu right here, and it closed a couple years after she died. She died in 1965. And now we're going to talk about Bill. Bill Suhu. So we had always thought that Bill was probably the first Chinese mayor ever in America, but it turns out he was the second. There was first in California. Let's go first with California. How's that? So he served on a grand jury in 1956 and on the council in 1962, and he was elected mayor in 1966, which at that time there were 60 Chinese residents in Oxnard, and only 10 of them were registered to vote. So he became the first Chinese mayor. Well, he was also the first Oxnard-born son to become mayor of Oxnard. Oh, let me just back up. So this is, of course, Bobby Kennedy. So this picture was taken just a couple of days before he was assassinated. He came here because he was doing the whole presidential thing, right, where he was trying to become our president. Okay. So no story would be complete without Earl Stanley Garner, who is, of course, the author of the Perry Mason series of books. He was a lawyer in Ventura County from 1911 to 1915. And so because we know that the Chinatown was considered a red light district, as you can see right here in a newspaper account, and there's lots of newspaper accounts like this, is that the Chinese people kept getting arrested. And he was their lawyer. Earl Stanley Gardner was their lawyer. So members of the Chinese community were so grateful to him that they deposited money into his bank account, kind of anonymously. There's money in your bank account all of a sudden. And it said that they would never let his bank account get under $200. So they were very grateful to Earl Stanley Garner. So here's what we learned today. We learned that the Chinese settlers came to Ventura in 1865. The first community in Ventura was on Figueroa. The Chinese residents in Ventura worked as agricultural laborers, servants, cooks, merchants, labor contractors, laundry workers, and they owned restaurants. Several Chinese families lived in Ventura beginning in the 1880s when the Yi family came with Emily. Ventura's Chinatown moved in 1906 to Main Street in the Avenue. The community remained there until 1923. Oxnard's Chinatown began around 1898 with the sugar beet factory. The community continued there on those blocks on Saviors Road until around World War II. And Chinese American history is not written in history books. And their contributions are vital to the building of Ventura County, and their story is an important element of California history. The end. things that you didn't know before. And let's take some questions. Yes?
Did the Mulharts or some of these prominent farmers, did they use the Chinese liquor?
Yes, yes.
They did.
In fact, I have a picture of one of the Mulhart, oh my gosh, it's the best picture of a Mulhart servant. I think his name was Ahoin, and he's all dressed up. He has a top hat on. He's dressed in Western clothing. It's in one of his books. Yeah, one of Jeff's books. Yeah, so if they worked on the farms, they worked in the houses. Yes. Any other questions, sir?
Was the last guy, what was his contribution to the last guy, what did he do?
Oh, Bill Shue, he was the mayor.
The very last guy, the American guy?
He wrote the Perry Mason series.
Oh.
Yes.
And it had something to do with Chinese people?
He was a lawyer, and he would protect them. He would.
On the show?
No, in real life. Okay,
No.
yeah.
Oh.
So he wrote books. They would show. Okay, but before that, he was a lawyer, and he was the lawyer for the Chinese community.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Have you
Yes.
seen the plaque in Ventura on the bank side of the bank building where it says the home of Perry Mason?
The
No.
office.
Where is that?
Yeah, it's on, I think, California Street. And it's in a bank. There's a bank in the Peacock, not Peacock, it's the bookstore across the street. It's
Bank of Books.
it's Peacock Books.
Oh, it could be.
Yeah, but it's right there on, I think, California and Main Street.
California Main Street,
But on the
southwest
building,
corner.
it's got a plaque on there, home of Perry Mason or something.
Oh, I'm gonna check that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Oh, the Earl Stanley Gardner Building.
So he's-
Huh?
It's
yeah,
called
and
the Earl
there's been-
Stanley Gardner Building.
Oh, the Earl
Yeah.
Stanley Gardner Building, I guess is what they call
Oh, okay. Now, is Richard Senators coming to talk to you?
Yes, but not about girls.
But he's an expert
Oh,
on
yeah.
that, so
Yeah.
ask him questions. Oh my gosh, he's interviewed the families, he knows it all. Yes.
Was the primary draw of America building a railroad, is that the laborers, or were they already here?
They were already here. But the original draw was the gold rush in 1849. And then, from what I understand, so the Chinese were excluded from the mines, being that they were taxed. It was called the foreign miner tax. So the Chinese laborers went and did other jobs. You know, they had restaurants, they had stores. So then, right around 1865 is the beginning of the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. And from what I understand is that they contracted people in China and brought them in for that. But there were probably also people on the ground that were involved with that as well.
Well, Linda, thank you so much.
Oh.
This is suitable for family.
Oh, thank you.
And-
Oh, nice. Thank you. I'm going to wear that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And now,
Yeah.
as usual, we always pass the hat. And I think you're going to do this, right? Larry?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Oh,